we have lost that nationalist currency. That's why I come back to it. And that's why it becomes so very easy to
Right.
duck people like us. The moment we say something sensible, oh, anti-national. But what is being promoted today is Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan nationalism, which is a travesty of Indian nationalism. This is RSS and the BJP. They have stolen this nationalism from us.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Deshkal with Yogendra Yadav. Today we are tackling a pretty heavy-duty topic, which Yogendraji, you have written about now in 3 columns, except one in between. It's been 3 columns. This is nationalism, and I want to start with the most basic question of all. Why do you think it is necessary for us to talk about nationalism right now?
I'm glad you asked this, Pooja, because nationalism is the currency of our political discussion. In a post-colonial country, a country which has fought against colonial rule, which has come out, nationalism is the very language that we speak about. And everything has been articulated in and through nationalism. Our freedom struggle, which articulated that idea of nationalism, is at the core of our political thinking. And unfortunately, that language of nationalism has been degraded so much that today it has become more like a football club loyalty. That is what worries me. So when there is Indo-Pak conflict, border conflict, almost a 4-day war, there is a nationalist euphoria. Understandably so, anywhere in the world this would be the case. The question is, what is the content of this nationalism? I look at it and I worry because this is very different from the kind of nationalism this country had 100 years ago when we were fighting an alien power, when nationalism was the prominent concern. Our nationalism was much more open-ended. Our nationalism was, as I say, it was about belonging without othering, which is a beautiful sentiment, you know. So our nationalism has been very different from the European variety of nationalism. And unfortunately, we have forgotten that distinction. You know, in Europe, if you say about some political party, if someone says this party is nationalist, what's the immediate connection? You would say, all right, so they are anti-immigrant, they are possibly white supremacist, they are jingoists, they are, cultural chauvinists, and so on and so forth. But this is not what nationalism was in India. And I worry, and the reason why I come back to nationalism is that people like us, those who want a liberal India, those who want a India which is plural, an India which respects diversity, we have lost that nationalist currency.
Right.
That's why I come back to it, and that's why it becomes so very easy to
Right.
duck people like us. The moment we say something sensible, oh, anti-national.
Right.
Why? Because we've lost that currency. To regain that currency of nationalism has to be one of the principal political tasks today.
Right, right. So you say we have lost nationalism, but there's also this assertion. Professor Suhas Palshikar wrote in response to your first article in the series on nationalism that this was in fact nationalism that was stolen from us. Our nationalism was stolen from us. Could you elaborate a little on this difference between nationalism that was lost and nationalism that was stolen?
Uh, I've been lucky to receive many responses to this article from Professor Suhas Parshikar, Professor Hilal Ahmed, and recently we had Professor Akil Bilgrami. So I really feel very grateful that people of this stature have cared to respond to this argument. Professor Parshikar's corrective, and I think it's a corrective to what I said. He says, look, it's not a nationalism we just forgot. Look, it's not that somehow absent-mindedly we lost it. Someone came and stole it from us. And let's name that someone. I've also named that in my article, but Professor Panchikar clearly delineates that and says This is RSS and the BJP. They have stolen this nationalism from us. So Professor Parshikar and I agree on the basics. We both agree that what is being presented in the country today as Rashtravad is actually a phony nationalism. It's a very poor copycat of European-style nationalism. This is not Indian nationalism. We both agree. And I think I agree with him that this has been stolen. But the only thing is that once something is stolen, you should ask both questions. Number one, who stole it? Number two, did I do something to allow it to be stolen? Was I casual? Was I careless? Both the questions should be asked. Professor Parshikar also says that it's important to remember that this other phony nationalism, as both of us agree to call it, in fact, that should be called pseudo-nationalism, what is being presented in the country as nationalism, because this is not Indian nationalism. He says, look, let's not forget that there was a streak of that present 100 years ago as well.
Right.
So that those who stole it were always there. Professor Akil Bilgrami disputes that. He says, look, what is being presented, this BJP style of nationalism is no more than 25, 30-year-old. I'm a little surprised by his assertion, but he's a scholar. I'm sure he must have thought about it. He says, no one has shown me the link between the previous kind of Hindu nationalism and today's Hindutva. I thought RSS is that link. But then he has, he must have given it a thought. So the question is, I take Professor Parshikar's correction on that as well, because these push the argument forward. And someone like him has been thinking about this question for quite some time. Where he and I have a slight disagreement and continue to have a disagreement is when I say that, look, we cannot simply say someone stole it. We made some mistakes. And who is this we? I specifically talk about India's westernized English-speaking elite, which included those who were liberals and those who were leftists. So in a sense, on one particular issue, the left and the liberals agreed with each other, which was their modernism, which was their disconnect with Indian culture, which was their indifference to the issues of nationalism. And I think that vacuum has cost us a lot. Professor Parshikar says, look, these are a few English-speaking elite. Why do you bother so much about them? My counter is, look, they may be not small in numbers, but please remember, ruling class is always small. And small ruling class produces ruling ideas. And to my mind, through 60s, 70s, 80s, there was an indifference to cultivating nationalism. Nationalism is not something that you got once and you always had it. Indian nationalism was always precarious. That's a point Professor Parshikar makes, and it's a very important corrective. He says, look, creating a very jingoist nationalism is a very simple thing. You start hating others and say, all right, Mera Desh Mahan, everything is lovely in my country, everything is bad with the neighbor. These are very simple ideas to project. But to create Indian nationalism of belonging without othering was always very precarious. Yes, it was precarious. So someone needed to nourish it. And we did not nourish it. In a sense, I do blame and indict the rulers of India through the 60s, 70s, 80s. And by rulers, I don't mean only political parties. Those who control intellectual establishments of India, those who control media of India. We failed to cultivate this very unique Indian nationalism, which I call, for simplicity's sake, I say, this is a Vivid Bharati nationalism. We remember the word Vivid Bharati, which in childhood we associated with the radio station. Such a beautiful. This is Vivid Bharati nationalism is Indian nationalism. But what is being promoted today is Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan nationalism, which is a travesty of Indian nationalism. We should have preserved it. We did not work enough. So if we say someone stole it, all right, some responsibility resides with us as well. And that's where we need to think many things afresh.
Right. So I just want to push back a little on that. In a time like this, when liberals, so to speak, are already under attack by the establishment, where there is talk of Andolan GVs, Khan Market Gang, etc., etc. Um, wouldn't placing so much responsibility for the slide or the loss of a certain kind of nationalism on the left liberal or the deracinated elite, however one might call them, uh, risk absolving the Hindutva tinged nationalism, the Hindutva nationalism, in fact, of blame in this?
Not quite, in fact, and that's why I take Professor Parshika's corrective to be, I accept that corrective, because maybe in my initial article, I of course mentioned BJP, RSS and what they have done to distort
Yeah,
it. I
yeah,
did not emphasize that enough, and his corrective is very important
yeah.
to say they have stolen it.
Mhm.
But as I said, if someone steals something from me, should I not wonder, was I careless?
Mhm.
So when I say I was careless and someone stole it, I'm not absolving someone who stole it. I'm not saying he's not a thief. I'm not saying he's not a cheat. I'm
Mhm.
saying, but I should have been careful too.
Mhm.
That's the point I'm making. And I think moments like this, Pooja, are moments where one should do very honest introspection. I identify myself with liberals in that broad sense, although the word liberal is something I've never used for self-description. I, if you use the word left broadly for all those people who stand for the poor, I identify myself as left, although I've never been a Marxist. Uh, and I see all liberals and all left as colleagues, friends today in rebuilding a new India. But in order to do so, we must do very honest introspection. If we do not do introspection, if we do not pose some harsh questions to ourselves, we would never learn. So if we believe, like, I must have said that earlier too, the Indian elite in many ways is like the Western coast and Eastern coast American elite. We all believe that Trump is an idiot and that
Mhm.
people have been swayed by an idiot. They'll come back on course. I was always right. No,
Right.
we may have made some very serious mistakes. Unless we are willing to recognize that, we do not progress. So, yes, I know it's harsh. I know it hurts many people. But at a moment like this, an honest introspection is required. And that's why I've written about Nirmal Verma.
Mhm.
Nirmal Verma, who was such a fierce critic of the left and the seculars, was bitter, was very harsh, was merciless in criticizing the secular and the modern people. Nirmal Verma himself was a communist once upon a time. He sort of ideologically he had a rethink. But I'm saying, notwithstanding other things that you may not agree, remember, Nirmal Verma is asking some very serious questions.
What?
If we
So
do not attend to those questions,
yeah,
yeah.
those are actually, that is actually what I want to get at. We've been, I feel, talking about a certain kind of nationalism or a certain idea of nationalism without really attempting to define its contours. I think I'm glad you brought up Nirmal Verma. You have written about him, of course, but could you talk a little bit about these very important questions that he raised and how can they be used to define the contours of this kind of nationalism that you're talking about?
Let's start with three simple questions that any nationalism would ask. Number one, uh, what is India?
Mm.
There can be two answers. One answer can be, oh, look, India is an accident of history. Some political boundaries have been drawn. There's no essence to India. Every country has its own peculiar boundaries. And why should we get very sentimental about this?
Mm.
The other answer is India, the state called India, is an inheritor to the civilization called India. These are two very different answers.
Right.
Very many modern people give the first answer. And people like Nirmal Verma insisted on the second answer, that they said that there is a civilizational content to India. That's one. Second, should we be proud of being an Indian? Now, once again, there are two ways of being proud. One is to say, I'm proud because I hate China, because I hate Pakistan, because everyone else is poor, Mera Desh Mahan, etc. That's idiotic, jingoist, or of course, this that cannot stand even 1 minute of any scrutiny. But is there any other way of being proud? Our national movement again showed us the way of being proud without trying to brush under the carpet many unseemly aspects of our civilization and culture. Nirmal Verma gives an answer. Nirmal Verma says that I'm proud of being an Indian because Indian civilization has continued to carry forward that disembodied notion of the self, a self which is not detached from nature, a self which is human that are not detached from the universe. He says India happens to have carried that forward, something that the West has lost. So I'm proud of being an Indian because it represents an element of humanity which is worth preserving. Now, this is not a jingoist answer. You cannot say this is not an answer that says everything that happens in India is great and everything that those. It's not an idiotic answer. This answer also, of course, would face tough questions. So, what about caste system? What about inequalities? What about injustice to women? Uh, does your pride not also invite some sense of shame? Gandhi had an answer to this. He said, unless you feel ashamed of certain things that are happening in India, you cannot feel proud of being in India. But Gandhi was. Gandhi had the courage. And Nirmal Verma is proud of being an Indian because India produced a Gandhi who could question the modern civilization. So the second question is broadly, do you feel proud? Do you take pride in India, notwithstanding all the problems? And mind you, this is not a pride that you only Indians can have. Nirmal Verma is equally happy with Pushkin taking pride in the Russian culture. He's equally happy with other people taking pride in other cultures. In every country, if I say, that my mother cooked a roti which I've never tasted again in my life, it doesn't mean that the auntie next door cooked bad rotis. It doesn't mean that others were poor. It just means that this is unique to me. So that's the second thing. And third is, do we owe something to this entity called nation? Or is it something that we just, that it's one of the many loyalties that we possibly have? Do I owe anything to Delhi's IPL cricket team? I don't think I owe them very much. I happen to live in this city. I don't feel particularly attached to it. But is that the way I should relate to my nation? Do I owe something to this nation? What is it that I owe? These are questions that modern liberal progressive people have not really confronted. They do not give answers that work, answers that have deep cultural resonance. And that's why I turn to someone like Nirmal Verma, who offers answers that I'm not happy with. But he forces us to ask questions. These are questions, these are core cultural, civilizational questions. And culture is something we all wish to turn our eyes away from because modern Indian English speaking intellectuals or English speaking in modern Indians are actually so deracinated, you know. And in fact, both these things are actually mirror images of each other. When you're so deracinated, when you're so cut off from your culture, it produces two reactions. One is, well, the sense of awkwardness and shame. And let's face it, a large number of English educated modern Indians have a deep sense of inferiority about being an Indian. We don't talk about it, but that inferiority either takes a sense of aping the West, or the same sense of inferiority also takes the sense that this reaction of Mera Bharat Mahan, Vishwa Guru. अरे कोई पड़ोसी नहीं मानता आप विश्व गुरु बन गए कैसे बन गए so these are the same reactions that come from a cultural vacuousness, and that cultural vacuousness needs to be attended to. So these are the questions that we need to face when we think about nationalism.
Right. So I just, again, a slight pushback on this. Is there, I mean, you have, in your article about Nirmal Verma, you have also mentioned thinkers like A.K. Saran, JPS Oberoi, Ramesh Chandra Saha. These people, they have all looked at nationalism through the lens of culture and identity. But is there a way of looking at nationalism through the lens of, say, development? For example, in the way that Gandhi did, or J.C. Kumarappa, who was closely associated with Gandhi. So is that a more fruitful way of looking at the question of nationalism?
It's not either or. We need to do both.
Mhm.
We need culture, and civilization is a lens that we cannot overlook. If we completely overlook that,
Mhm.
remember Gandhi, what he said. Gandhi used to put these things so beautifully. He said, I want to keep all my windows open, the windows of my house open. But people forget the next part of what he said. But I refuse to be swept off my feet. That is what we need. So culture was there in Gandhi as well, but it's more than culture. So it's a civilizational issue. Gandhi believed that Western civilization has lost any moorings as a civilization, and that it was that he was not only trying to save India, he was trying to save the West as well. So yes, these are deeper issues, J.C. Kumarappa and others. So yes, our nationalism cannot only be cast in cultural terms. In the last instance, our nationalism has to be about well-being of every Indian. Nation is not an abstraction. Nation is about people and
Right.
their well-being. And unfortunately, much of what is today described as nationalism loses touch with it. I'm glad you mentioned all these figures. You could add many other names to that. My own sense, Pooja, is, and I want to write about this more and more, that we in the 20th century we have had two traditions. We've had a very strong egalitarian tradition, which we remember from Narayan Guru to Ambedkar to the full Ambedkar tradition, Marxist, socialist, feminist. So there is this egalitarian tradition, uh, which is this. Somehow we have not paid enough attention to that. In the decades of 50s and 60s and 70s, when a certain progressive, modern, left-oriented intellectuals dominated the establishment, at that time, many of them were pushed to the corner. It's time to recover them. It's time to recover them because although many of them showed somewhat right leanings, as I
Mhm.
say in the case of Nirmal Verma as well,
Mhm.
and was the case with Dharampala as well, though
Mhm.
not with Saran or Oberoi or Ashish Nandi or Daya Krishna. They were immune for that. But notwithstanding all those difficulties, this recovery of this tradition, indigenous tradition, is critical to reinvigorating our nationalism, which can take on this pseudo phony jingoist nationalism. That's why I go back again and again to them, because these are resources.
Right, right. So, finally, I want to go back to another root question, which is there any reason to be suspicious or to have mistrust in the notion of nationalism itself? Now, I bring this up for two reasons. One is, of course, Rabindranath Tagore's well-known argument that nationalism is not is an anti-Indian idea. I think that was how he described it in few words. And the other reason I bring this up is because you mentioned Professor Bilgrami's response to your article, in which he mentions this suspicion of the state, which and the idea of the state is, of course, there is that hyphen that links state with the nation, and Gandhi himself was suspicious of this idea of the state, of the heavily centralized state. So in today's age, do we have reason to be suspicious of nationalism on these grounds?
one light thing, and then I come to the serious thing.
Sure.
The interesting thing is that if you ask any Indian, Bengali or non-Bengali, was Rabindranath Tagore nationalist? 99.9% would tell you, of course he was nationalist. Of course he is the epitome of our nationalism. As an Indian, I take pride in. None of them know that Rabindranath Tagore actually wrote a book, indicting nationalism. And this is, to my mind, the beauty of Indian nationalism. That Indian nationalism actually entertained and completely admitted debates about nationalism itself. In a jingoist nationalism, in a German-style nationalism, in an Israel-style nationalism, you cannot have debates about nationalism is good or bad. You are anti-national, you are thrown out. But Rabindranath Tagore questions nationalism, critiques nationalism, and yet remains our national icon, undisputed national icon. This is the beauty of Indian nationalism, because which admits questions about itself. On the other deeper question of is it only an enchantment with state? And it is true. The association of in nationalism joined with an enchantment with modern state, a modern state which is increasingly more powerful, increasingly less tolerant, increasingly with greater capacity for violence, is something to be thought through. It is something indeed. And so it's the state part of nation state that needs to be thought through. And Professor Gibel Grami is absolutely right to bring in Gandhi on this question, because Gandhi always, while he was deeply nationalist, and in fact, Gandhi and Tagore have a wonderful exchange on this question. And in a sense, to my mind, if you allow me to paraphrase, what Gandhi was saying to Tagore is this: that what you call nationalism is a European variety of nationalism. We don't take that seriously. Our nationalism is very different. And why are you criticizing our kind of nationalism? To my mind, these two nationalisms should be given two different names altogether. Just for ease, so that we don't need to vicariously carry the guilt of German nationalism. We should just carry the pride of Indian nationalism, the positivity of Indian nationalism, which connected me to the rest of the world. So should we question nationalism? Yes, if it is, if nationalism degenerates into this, the pseudo-nationalism, the phony nationalism, the aggressive jingoist nationalism that pits me against my neighbor, then of course some people should stand up and question. And I salute those Indians. I may not agree with them, but those who have the courage to stand up to this, I think we should salute that. However, my preferred option would be to argue and say that this is not nationalism at all. Remember, my nationalism connected me to the struggle of people in South Africa. My nationalism connected me to Palestinians. My nationalism connected me to South America, Latin America, and their struggles. My nationalism took me to Bandung. My nationalism is not about hating my neighbor. So I would much rather, I would absorb that critique of nationalism to forge and reinforce a very typical, unique Indian nationalism. We should be proud of that Indian nationalism. And through that nationalism and in that vocabulary, I'm proud of being an Indian.
That is a great thought-provoking note on which to end this video. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us again today. And I certainly look forward to more conversations on this topic, because I think we are nowhere close to draining this particular well as a topic. And viewers, thank you once again for joining us. We will have more, of course, coming in the next few weeks. And we look forward to having you join us again. Thank you very much.